These lectures are an important part of the history of Nordic Northwest, which was founded in 1986 to support the Nordic languages at PSU and have evolved to support all things Nordic in Oregon and Southwest Washington. So our speaker tonight actually has been scheduled for a whole year. She was supposed to speak last March because then we had the COVID. Then I tried again in September, it didn't work. So now third time, that's a charm. So let me introduce the speaker. Our speaker tonight is Líney Árnadóttir, an associate professor in chemical engineering at Oregon State University. Got her BS in chemistry from the University of Iceland. And afterwards, she moved to Seattle for graduate school and has lived in the Pacific Northwest ever since. Líney was born in Reykjavik, Iceland, where she grew up. She spent many summers at her grandfather's farm in southern Iceland. Her whole family still lives in Iceland, but she's visited as often as she can, and she rides her little Icelandic pony when she's in Iceland. So now I'll leave it to Líney to tell us how it was to grow up in Iceland, the smallest and the most remote of the Nordic countries. So let us welcome Líney.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's been quite a trip to get here to talk to you all. And there was one thing that I was a little surprised by when I was preparing this talk, is that I'm a professor. I give talks all the time. This talk is a lot harder. First of all, how am I going to talk about my whole upbringing in 45 minutes? The other thing is that, like, what is it in my upbringing that would be of interest? I didn't grow up anywhere else. So I'm going to try to tell you about the things that I think were different in my upbringing that it might have been in yours, but I don't know, because I only had one. So the other thing I'll tell you, this is probably the first talk I've ever give that it will have numbers, but no equations. Apologize for that. The first thing I'm always asked for when in the U.S. is my name. People stumble over it, although for Scandinavians it looks quite straightforward. But in case it doesn't, so Icelanders, we don't have last names. My name is Líney Árnadóttir. It means I'm daughter of Arna. Arna is my father's first name. We only use first names. The other thing, we don't use titles. The only person that I would ever address with a title is the president, and that was if I really needed a favor and it wasn't written. I would never do it in an informal way. So we don't use last names, and we all go by daughters or sons. So this is essentially my family tree, and it kind of shows you a little bit how the system works, and it works very well because you can still figure out the family. So my father is on the horse. That's his natural environment. My mom is downtown enjoying the city, a very rational environment. And he is Thorvald's son, and my mom is Kristen's daughter, and that is because they are the son and daughter of my grandfather. But you also see there's a big trend here. You see Árni Thorvaldsson, my father. He has the son Thorvaldur Árnason. He has the son Árni Thorvaldsson, and the chain keeps on going. Because we're all named after people in our families for the most part. I'm named after my great-grandma, my sister after the great-grandma on the other side. So if I introduce myself in Iceland with Líney Árnadóttir, people know who I am. They know approximately what family I come from because names are so tight in the family. We don't need we're so small community, you don't need the family name for the system to work. So before I go into some of the details about kind of things that we do, I just want to give you a little bit a sense of the size of the Iceland, where it is, and how small it really is. Well, it's not really that small. It's about 39,000 square miles, about the size of Kentucky, and it's important that it's twice the size of Denmark. The reason why that is important is that we have this, at least from the Icelandic side, we have this simpling relationship with Denmark because we were under the Danish crown for a long time. We like winning them in soccer. That doesn't happen a lot. But there is this is one of the things. We are bigger than Denmark. Population of Iceland is only about 365,000. That's about half of the population of just Portland. Still, Oregon is only about 2.5 times the size of Iceland. So it's very sparsely populated. It is also located way up north, as you can see there. The northern part of Iceland actually touches the Arctic Circle, and Reykjavik, the latitude of Reykjavik is somewhere in between the latitude of Alaska, Fairbanks, Alaska, and Anchorage, Alaska. But it's not that cold, and that is because of the Gulf Stream that comes through from the Gulf of Mexico and hits Iceland and rest of Scandinavia, but obviously misses Greenland, which is why Greenland is all ice. There's one thing that is not in here. We have the temperatures that are around freezing in winter. It's perfect for that wet sludge, so your feet are always wet and always cold, no matter what your footwear is. In the summer, temperatures are around 70. The thing that is not counted for here, though, is super windy. The winds in Iceland is that you can lean into them and you don't fall. We would do that as kids. We would play that, like trying to fall in and see if the wind catches you. This is a lot of fun. Jumping, not a good idea, because then it catches you. So that's one of the things. It was very windy. So that was one of the things when they talked about storms in Oregon. I got all scared. Then the storm came. It wasn't really. The difference, though, is in Oregon you have trees, and trees cause damage, storms. In Iceland you have no trees. So the biggest hazard of storms in Iceland nowadays are the trampolines that are flying everywhere. We didn't have those when I was growing up, so that was not really a problem. So Iceland is also very central, or at least in our opinion. It's about 7.5 hours from Portland, direct flight. It's about 3 hours from essentially any place in northern Europe, Copenhagen and London, and about 4.5 hours from southern Europe. It's fast to get anywhere if you want to leave. Iceland is very sparsely populated, but the population is all in the green areas around the circle. There's nobody who lives in the middle. Most of us have never been there. I have been there, but that's because I'm one of those people who like to hike. But most people don't ever risk going there. So about 62% of the people live in Reykjavik. Then there's the capital of the north, Akureyri. Before I looked up those numbers, if I would have asked how many people lived in Akureyri, I would have said about 50,000. Currently it's 20. The other big places, they have less than 3,000 people. We would consider these big places. Everything else, smaller. So essentially, the odds are if you talk to somebody. We have one main road around the country, Highway 1. It is asphalt, the whole circle. And that was probably finished about 10, but it didn't use to. Big parts of it travel. But it's slow going. That is essentially because a lot of it is one lane, its direction. In winter, the weathers aren't so nice, so you can't even count on the road being open. Growing up, there was a lot of, packing the car with blankets in case you got stuck on the pass. Leaving the farm, where I spend a lot of time. Icelanders are very superstitious, and we believe in all sorts of signs. And it was very common that my grandfather would come and say, "Well, it's time for you to leave." Then we knew the car would break down on them. These were kind of things that you would read into all sorts of signs, mostly for weather. Down in the corner here on the left, I just have a map. This is a random map from a day in February earlier this year. All the red ones, those are roads that are not passable, even on four-wheel drive. The big cars that they go on the glaciers. and these are main roads. So we're very used to being locked in. And growing up, you were always very. So I just wanted to say a few things about Icelandic history, because I think some of those are quite important to kind of where we come from. So we were settled in the 874 by Ingólfur Árnason, which was from Norway. We have the oldest parliament in the world, which we are very proud of. And then we essentially started a commonwealth with Norway. And then I think we were passed down to Denmark with Norway as a part of some royal marriage. And then we became independent of Denmark in 1944. So all the history books that I read as a kid were written by the people who were part of that independent movement. This is a really odd thing, because we always felt very proud that we were independent, but we also feel kind of part of Denmark. If I come to Copenhagen, I feel at home. Okay? Still, I'm really proud of being Icelandic. A little bit of a conflict there. These pictures are from the parliament, and these are from the 50-year celebration of the independence. And the woman in white there is Vigdís Finnbogadóttir. She was the first president I ever remember. This is special to me because I was very mature when I realized that that was special. That I grew up thinking it was absolutely possible as a woman that I could be a president. I didn't know anything else. Yeah, that was as okay. So a little bit about me. So I'm born in Reykjavik in 77. I'm a middle child of 3. I have a sister who's 6 years older than me, and a brother there's 5 years older than me. I'm from a typical middle class family in Iceland. There's not really a class system in Iceland. We're all kind of one big middle class. My father is a carpenter. My mother is a everybody in Iceland has either ties to the farms or to the sea. My family, very firmly farmers. I spent most of my summers at a farm with my grandparents. My mom is born and raised on a farm. My father, although born in Reykjavik, spent most of his time on the farm, which is one of the reasons why we horses. My dad can. Animals. We always had horses. So in the summer, I would always spend my summers on the countryside. So the school system was set up so that I would finish school end of April, just in time for the lambs to be born. We'd come and we could help out with keeping track of the lambs. And again, school wouldn't start again until September, because that way we could help gathering the hay. The whole school system when I was a kid was set up to make it so that I could be at the farm. So I spent most of my time on the farm until I was about 15. Sometimes the whole summers, when I was younger, probably 4 to 6 weeks, like that. I can't remember. I just remembered summers I was at the farm. And at the farm that's my great-grandma, my grandparents, aunt, their children, their cousins, and then also all of the other cousins. This is like a herd of kids from all over that are just there for the. We worked at the farm. We took care of the sheep. We built the cows. We learned to ride horses. Not as fun, but to actually gather the sheep. It's actually very useful if a child can ride a horse, because they can actually help out a lot. They can ride a horse. So we all knew how to ride. We did that a lot. I still do, and I still enjoy it, although I don't. Back in the corner there is a picture that is from a museum, and it's in black and white, and it made me feel very old when I saw it. Because this picture could have been of me. We would build these little cabinets. We would have our own farms. And our animals were actually bones, so the big jaw bones from the sheep or cows, like smaller ones that sheep. We would have all this tiny little area that we would have. That's something the parents have done for centuries. We thought we were creative, probably. We also, the picture of the tractor there is a kind of reminder for me to tell you that that's how I learned to drive a car. So the first time I learned to drive a tractor when I was probably about 11. That is way before I can sit in a chair and reach the pedals. If you need to brake or step on the clutch, you jump out of the seat and you land on the two pedals, right? So I learned how. But the gas is at the steering wheel, right? So you could just sit, and if you're just doing exactly what he's doing in that picture, you're just driving in circle on the farming land. All you need is the gas. You're not allowed to touch the brake because that ruins the field. So we didn't even know where the brake was. The only thing we knew is that to slow down, you step on the clutch. If you feel like you're going too fast down a hill, don't do anything. Because one of us actually did it with the clutch. Wasn't very helpful. So if any of you have ever been in Iceland, you see the picture there in the corner, that's Kerið. It's on the Golden Circle. That's where all the buses stop if you're traveling around Iceland. That's where I spend all my summers. So this, my great-grandma, when she sold or passed the land down to my grandparents, she didn't pass this site down. She gave that to charity so somebody would take care of it and make sure it was a landmark that everybody knew. So the tourists that walk around there all the time and go down to the water, they know nothing about the trolls that are down there because they really didn't want us to skate on it or go anywhere near it because it's really deep. So we were always very scared of that place. And it is scary. So this introduction is actually was already done. This is essentially what I did, except the first one. I went to Menntaskólann við Sundur Gymnasium. That is, it's interesting it's where you go to gymnasium is important because Iceland is so small that we can essentially find somebody in common in about 5 minutes. Which neighborhood did you grow up? Which gymnasium did you go to? And if you haven't found it there, just like, okay, so what sports club did you go to? All right, now we have a common friend that we know. So that's an important information. The picture of me over there, I'm probably about a 7. This is at my grandparents' place. I'm in the backyard. You can see the sheep barn behind there and then the hay barn. I'm very proud of this picture because I'm actually holding the rein correctly. That's very important. Also, this is my grandfather's mare, and a foal from this mare has actually been my dad's breeding mare for 20-some years. And he had to put her down just last year. It's a very sad day, but when I saw the picture, I'm just like, I can't believe it. There's only two generations of horses. So I grew up in Reykjavik, although I spent all my summers at the farm. And this is the part of Reykjavik here on the left is where I grew up. So this is a big valley called Elliðaárnar, and it's a fishing river that runs through the middle of Reykjavik. And it's actually quite expensive to fly fish there for salmon. So up on the right, I don't have a pointer here, is Breiðholt, where I lived when I was a kid, down on until I was 10, and then I moved about 2 miles away to the other corner of that picture, called Árnadóttir. And those are, again, important when I meet an Icelander, so we can figure out who we know, who we have in common. The neighborhoods are very similar in most ways. Those are regular working class neighborhoods like all of Reykjavik. Although people outside these neighborhoods, they would be scared of the one up on the hill. Maybe for some reason, people who don't live there or are from there think that's the ghetto of Reykjavik. There are no ghettos in Reykjavik. And I can tell you, if you lived in one of those houses on the edges with a view of the river, it doesn't feel so bad. It's pretty nice. So every neighborhood in Iceland has a sports club, mostly soccer. And we would belonging to these sports clubs. The one in the orange in the corner, that is my current team. They're actually doing pretty well. I lived in the US for many, many years. I still know the standing of the soccer team in my neighborhood because that's important. There's also swimming pools everywhere. There are more swimming pools in Reykjavik than I can even think of. And each neighborhood has their swimming pool. And nowadays, teenagers, if you're between the age of 16 and 20, that's where you go after school. Like if you, at night, you want to meet your friends, you don't want to be at parents' place, you need to be somewhere and talk to your friends, be on your own, you go to the pool. It's actually kind of funny, you go in, I went to the pool like on a Thursday at like 8 p.m. and I look around and I'm just like, wow, it's just, I don't know, this is like 10th grade, I don't know what's going on here. The whole neighborhood is in the pool. The pictures right on the corner there are just the waterfalls that are in this beautiful valley where we used to play as kids all the time. And up on the corner are actually the stables. So that's what we did. We would hang out in the valley. We stayed away from the river, not because we were so well behaved and never did what we were not supposed to do, but more because we were all, there were always stories about trolls and elves around these kind of natural hazards, and we believed them. So we never went close to the river, so we never got in that kind of a trouble. But so that's kind of where we're from. So I was trying to figure out how I could tell the story. So I figured I would try to go in somewhat of a chronicle order, and then tell you some about some of our holidays that might be different to you. So Iceland, like all of the Scandinavian countries, we have very long maternity leaves. But after the maternity leaves are over and the childcare starts, first kids mostly go to day parents. And those are essentially just somebody who stays at home and takes care of a handful of toddlers. They get some benefits from the government, but mostly it's just independent people that do that. I guess the picture it's not a very good resolution there, but you see the house there in the middle in the green picture. You see 3 baby carriages outside. This is very common. This is nap time for the toddler. And on the end there, that's my mom taking my sister up from a nap. So we all sleep outside, no matter the weather, winter or summer, during the day. That's where we nap. We don't do it overnight, but we do it during the day. And you still see this all around the city in the middle of the day outside cafes. There's going to be a lot of baby carriages because the parents are inside having coffee. This is considered perfectly normal. Iceland is super safe, so this really isn't that dangerous at all. And we don't have any animals either. We don't have any. There's nothing that can crawl up there. There's no squirrels. You know, we have birds, that's about it. We have foxes, but they are so scared, they're not going to be in the city. So it's actually very safe. And then there's a preschool and a nursery school before you go to elementary school. So I think, So one thing about preschool, I obviously went to preschool. I didn't go to kindergarten. And I think it's probably quite a bit different than here, unless if little kids are just getting so much smarter. Because when I went to first grade, when I was 6, I knew the letters, but I most certainly couldn't read. And most of us couldn't. And that was just because it was not we spent our time outside building snowmen. So we weren't really taught to read until we came to first grade. There would be maybe a couple of students that knew how to read. So I didn't, most certainly didn't. So Iceland, we have school is mandatory 1st through 10th grade. That's the first. Then there's gymnasium, that is 4 years. And then the university, there's no back core. You go directly into your major for 3 years, and then you graduate if you go that route. They have shortened the gymnasium now down to 3 years, but that's not really that important. So when you go in gymnasium, we don't have a lot of electives anywhere. So in gymnasium, you just take kind of tracks. I went to physics tracks because I was good at math and I was bad at languages. Because in Iceland, nobody understands Icelandic outside Iceland. So you have to learn a lot of languages. So we had to learn one Scandinavian language, and by default that was Danish because of our Danish connection. So we first started learning Danish, and then English, and then I could pick either German or French. So I would have to learn 3 languages. And that was because I was doing math. So if you do biology or physics, you learn 3 languages, otherwise you have to take 4. So probably both French and German. So I essentially am a scientist and engineer today because I felt like I was very bad at languages. So the other things that we do, that we learn in Iceland in school that is considered normal, that I think is different from here. We took classes in poetry, essentially reciting poetry twice a week. When I was 5th through 7th grade, you would stand up in the class, you would cite your section of the poem. It was very stressful because I was really scared of standing in front of people. And now you would cite your poem and then, memorize those just to know. It's very nice now to know them because now I actually understand them. As a kid, I didn't. PE is also, in swimming, is something that Icelanders are somewhat obsessed about. So we had to pass swimming exams to get to graduate. We had to do a rescue, so jump into a pool and draw somebody to shore. We did an endurance where we would swim 5K, and then there were some speed ones too. We also do PE, which is like endurance tests and gymnastics tests, and you need to do that and pass exams on that, even in gymnasium. So as a 20-year-old, you're being tested on doing cartwheels. That was definitely not one of my strong suits. So we generally walk to school. And I'm going to say, like everybody else probably says, it was uphill both ways. We fought off polar bears. The weather was always terrible, and it's much easier now. So it's about a mile that we walked either way. And my nephew, who's 7, he still does that. He lives in Reykjavik. He walks. It's about a mile for him to walk either way. He walks every day. He bikes in the spring. The thing that is different when I grew up from him is that I was what you would call liklabarn, or latchkey kid. It meant we had a key around our neck because our parents were at work. School was only half day, so the other half we were just at home fighting for ourselves. But the thing is, most of us were. So this wasn't, we would walk home, like 2 or 3 of us, and we would go home and we would make we essentially had like grilled sandwiches for lunch most days that we made in a waffle iron. And then we would cook up some sort of a drink, an orange juice or something, and have a party. I thought it was actually quite nice. And my best friend, her mom was a stay-at-home mom. And if you came to her house, she had freshly baked, like buns for tea time and things like that, and I thought that was absolutely heavenly. My friend, on the other hand, she would much rather be at my place and just trying to cook up whatever we could find. My sister would be around because we're like 7. This is 6. We're 6 to so first grade essentially through. We're at home on our own. We knew if there was a parent in the building, but we would never go to them unless there was some absolute emergency. The other system that we had, we were outdoors a lot. So we would spend all of our time outdoors playing. And calling between houses was expensive. So and we obviously didn't have phones. So this is a picture of the neighborhood where I grew up. That window on your right is my kitchen window, and my aunt lived in the kitty corner over there. So the system was, if we were outside playing, and if I would go in somewhere with a friend, and I wouldn't go just anywhere, there was certain places that I was more likely to go to. There was a specific color of dishcloth that got tied out on the balcony or put out on the window. So my parents could look out the window and they would just scan the neighborhood. They would find my collar and then just, oh, she went in there. And then they would just go and do their thing. So that's what we did. So we were outside most of the time. And yeah, it didn't cause too much trouble. So we would play a lot of group games. And there was a large age range in these groups. It would be from about 5 to 14, but most of us somewhere between maybe 8 and 12. And they would knock on your door and say, do you want to come out and play? And we would play these big games where everybody could play along. I was trying to translate those into English, and these are what Google told me was possibly translation. And, if I'm wrong, blame Google. British Bulldog is like what we would call a big fish game. It is essentially a tag game, where you have a team on one end that tries to run over to the other end, and there's a person in the middle that tags them, and then everything they tag, now they are stuck in the middle, and that's how you would kind of thin the crowd. We played that a lot. Eina krona or 1 krona is kind of a mix of a tag and hide and seek, where you would kind of all hide and then you would try to sneak back to a certain location without them noticing. And then there was a punch ball or kilo, which is like a baseball-like game, but we didn't have baseball bats or mittens or anything like that, so we would do that with a frisbee for the most part. One thing that is common with all these games is that it works for a large range of kids and capabilities. Because a lot of us would actually be the team that wouldn't be catched. We would call it being a chocolate, that means that, nobody could ever tag you. And it's more fun for the older kids because we were kind of stuck with the younger ones to play something where they can be along, can tag along. The other thing is there's no gear needed. Because most of us none of us had really, we would have these little balls, these ones there, we would get those for spring gifts. These little balls, or you would get like soap bubbles, things like that. But we generally everybody didn't have a soccer ball or baseball bat or, so you would never play games where you needed anything because then most of us couldn't play. So most of the games we played were something where you didn't really need any tools to play. The default sport is soccer. It's all about soccer. Everybody plays soccer by default. So that's just, you don't even have to ask about sports. People play soccer. There's another thing that is kind of part of this free range culture in Iceland is that we actually have this kind of a guidelines for how long kids can stay outside. And this was a thing when I was a kid, and this is the current guidelines. And essentially the parents follow this and the kids follow it, which is very easy because we all know when we're supposed to come home. So we can just stay outside until this time and then everybody goes home. So nobody has to go home early because we all go home at the same time. So during the school year, 12-year and younger can stay out until 8 p.m. and 13 to 16-year-olds until 10 p.m. Keep in mind in winter, it gets pitch dark at 5. So this doesn't look so nice, right? In the summer months, the 12-year-olds stay out until 10 and the older until midnight. But now there's daylight. Always. The sun never sets. It was actually much harder to keep track of time in the summer than it was in the winter. Because I remember looking at the clock and I'm just like, it's 1 a.m., I am in trouble, and we're all there, running home, trying to stay out of trouble. But these are guidelines that people follow, both children and adults. And it's still like that. People are more, they hang outside in their little groups. After 16, people are essentially considered independent, and I don't think they generally have time when they should be at home. I don't think there's any guidelines. I most certainly didn't. Okay, so I was going to tell you some of the holidays and the things that we would look forward to, and most of the holidays in Iceland are kind of as similar as they are here. And there are some, like the New Year's, we have crazy fireworks, where we essentially, everybody tries to outshine their neighbor. So what you end up doing is that you're looking one direction and there's a crazy fireworks right in front of you, but it's the same thing is happening right behind you. So you just stand and twist in circles. This is also the night when we all got to stay up late, obviously, to watch the fireworks. Our Independence Day is June 17th. That's the day when we would all go downtown. There's like a big march, and the marching is that you actually walk. I didn't know that here when you have these festivities for Scandinavia or for any kind of a march in the US, people stand on the sideline and watch other people march. In Iceland, we just all walk together in one group. That's the march. There is no show or anything. We just walk together, and then at the end there is some sort of a concert. We also celebrate the first day of summer in April. That is way before summer starts, because it's still cold then. And that's part of the old Nordic calendar. So we have a lot of holidays that kind of line up with the Nordic calendar. So talking about the Nordic calendar, the 12th night of Christmas is actually a big deal in Iceland. It's the end of Christmas. So this is the last day you're allowed to fire up fireworks. So what we would do is that we would go around the neighborhood and we would pick up the fireworks that had kind of, the burnt fireworks from New Year's Eve, and we would save them. We would put them into a pile, and we would ignite them to make a bonfire. Sounds like a great idea at the time. We never got in trouble. I don't know why, but some of them hadn't gone off, so there would be a lot of fireworks splashing all over. It also is always associated with the elves or the hidden people. So the hidden people are the Tolkien's elves. They're the people that are invisible and you can't see. They're not particularly nice, but they're very beautiful and they charm you. So you're always kind of wary of them, but you respect them. So on the 12th night of Christmas is kind of where we would dress up like the hidden people and try to be elves. So Christmas is a special time for every kid, and Icelanders, they have a lot of, just like everybody, a lot of traditions around Christmas. We're not very religious, so there's not much of going to church or things like that, but there's a lot of tradition. So we would decorate with an Advent wreath early, 4 weeks before Christmas, that we would light every Sunday. We also have these Advent lights in the window that you can see over there that you would see in every Scandinavian house. I think those came from Sweden. I'm not quite sure. But this is going to be, I think my mom probably has 8 of them just for her house, and our house is just a regular home. Pretty much every window has those. And I have one in my house in Corvallis. My neighbors didn't quite know what to ask me, what that was about. The first year I was there, they thought I was Jewish, and they asked my partner like very diplomatically, like about Judaism, and he was just like, well, I don't know, I have no idea about that. But they were trying. So that's the lights. So we also, before Christmas, there's always a big gathering where we would make these leaf breads, which you can see there. So we get together and we cut those out. And you get better at them when you get older, but we always compete who would cut the most. It's a lot better to win that than who cuts the most beautiful ones. Not sure my mom really liked that competition, but you know, it was better for me. It worked better for me. So the Santas we have. So for Christmas kids, we have 13 Santas. We put a shoe out, one shoe out in a window for Santa. And if you're well behaved, you'll get something from Santa. If you don't, you get a potato. And this is a long time. It's 13 days. So most of us are kind of doomed to get a potato at least twice during that time period. But if you don't get a potato, what you get is something very small. We would get like mandarins, like 5 M&Ms was a really good day, or like 1 caramel. So these are very small kind of treats that you would get. But something that you would really, like, you would go to bed at 8 o'clock for that. And keep in mind, we're allowed to stay outside until 8 o'clock, so that's super early for us. But there's no big gift from Santa on Christmas Day. We also have the Christmas cat. And this is a picture of the Christmas cat to scale. The Christmas cat is really big and really scary. And you know, if you didn't behave well and you got a potato, that's better than the alternative. The Christmas cat will actually eat you. So he's quite bad. So these are the Jula lads, our Santa Clauses. There are 13 of them, and in the corner there are their parents, Grilla and Leppalúði. So we all have these 13, and they all have their characteristics, and they either show up in like the traditional Icelandic outfits or the Coca-Cola outfits. They can also wear those, but they always have their characteristics. And they're kind of nutty. So growing up, you were never scared of the Santa Claus, but they weren't particularly good guys. But they would play tricks on you, but they were not mean. And like when my mom grew up, she was scared of them. I mean, they weren't good at all. So they have, those are in English, but I'm not going to go through all of them, obviously. But there is like the door slammer. That's the one who kind of slams the doors. We have the one who peeks on the windows. That's a little creepy. And a lot of them are just thieves. They will lick your pots. They will steal stuff from you. They'll steal your candles. Their parents, Leppalúði and Grilla, they are trolls. And she is very scary. She also eats and cooks children, obviously. That's a theme. But she is also so scary that her 13 sons are scared of her, and her husband is also very scared of her. She's a very scary character, and now they actually have this big statue in the airport in Iceland around Christmas. It's huge, and it has Grilla and a big pot, and you will see all these people in the pot, like because they're being cooked. And I don't know about that. I was just like, I don't want to go in there. I remember being so scared of that. So that's what happens if you misbehave for Christmas. There's potato, Christmas cat, Grilla. Pretty tough consequences. But it's 13 days, so there's a lot of room for improvement. This, I think, is probably one of my favorite things about Christmas and Icelandic Christmas. Is that for us, there were books and Christmas are completely tied. So every year there is this book that comes out, a catalog that tells you about the new books that are coming out for Christmas, because everybody gets a book for Christmas. And as a kid, we would wait for this. We would wait for the catalog of books, and we would open it up and we would circle pretty much all of them, just in case, hoping to get them for Christmas. And I still kind of do. Now they're electronic, so I can download them, and I'll go through and I'll kind of send hints home. It's one I want. And then and for Christmas, we read. We lie on the sofa and read a lot. Nowadays, we also play cards and board games and things like that. Growing up, that wasn't allowed. You weren't allowed to play board games on Christmas. And we didn't have a VCR. We only had one channel, TV channel. I forgot. Yeah, we had one TV channel. And it would go, there was no TV in July, because the people in television also needed summer vacation. And there was no TV on Thursdays, which is probably the reason why we were always outside. There was one cartoon on TV around 6 o'clock. We mostly missed it. But, there were essentially no TV. So we got into this habit of reading a lot, and we still do. So, big thing. So this is kind of, I was wanting to leave some time for questions, because there is no chance I can tell you about all of the little things that I love about having grown up in Iceland. So here I just took together some few of the things that we did for Christmas. One of the things that I think about very fondly is that the day before Christmas, we listened to the Christmas greetings on the radio. I looked it up, and last time it took 16 hours. And they are just essentially reading Christmas cards on the radio. And this is what I can, like, when I turn it on, I can think about my grandparents' place, my parents' place. Everywhere you go on 23rd, there's this monotone voice on the radio, and it's reading the Christmas greetings. We also often have fermented rye on the 23rd. It smells awful, but it tastes fantastic. I guess, though, you have to be kind of raised with the smell to learn to appreciate it. A lot of people now do that earlier, simply because the smell is so bad that, you don't like it in the house. But I associate it with Christmas. So I kind of like the smell of the fermented fish mixed in with all of the cleaning efforts that were made to actually remove it. So for me, that is always kind of a sweet spot. So I think I'll stop it here and give you some chance to ask questions. Thank you so much for listening. And I had a.
So much. Well, anybody in the audience, if you have a question, I'll repeat it here so people at home can hear it. Any questions come to mind? Yes.
We were showing where you lived. To me, it looked like kind of a big apartment complex, kind of. Is that? I understand that's where you live with many other families. But when you said your grandparents lived on the farm, obviously that's so different from the apartment complex. So did most people live in kind of an apartment complex like that?
So the question is, did most people live in the kind of apartment complex we looked at, or on farms, or what?
So there is a mixture, but I think it was very typical. The way it worked for me is that when my parents were young, their first apartment was a small apartment complex, like a small apartment in an apartment complex, and then you upgrade, and now they live in a big house. So we lived in an apartment. I shared a bedroom with my sister for my first 10 years, which I thought was fantastic. I'm not sure my sister thinks the same, because she shared a room with me until she was 16. But that's very common. So most people would live in these smaller, you buy a beginner apartment and then you move up. So the younger people and the kids, they're normally in these apartment buildings, which is great because there's a lot of kids around. It's a great place to grow up. If you go to my parents' place now, very few kids running around because the people who own the houses are older. So it's very common.
Yeah.
How many letters do you have in the alphabet?
How many letters in your alphabet?
That's a tough one. Yeah. We have a lot of accents.
Yeah, I know you have a lot of accents.
A lot of accents, and we have 3 special ones. The first letter in my brother's name, which sounds like TH, it's kind of like a P, but it has kind of dropped down. It's like a pregnant P. And then there is the A and the I put together, and then we have one more. I think there are 36.
36, wow.
I think so, but a lot of them are accents. But you pronounce them differently, though. As soon as you have the accent, you get a different letter.
Yes.
You have access to Icelandic communities in Oregon and Washington.
Do you have access to Icelandic communities in Oregon and Washington?
Not so much in Oregon, but there's a big community in Seattle. And when I lived in Seattle, I was very active in it. There's a lot of Icelandic people who live in Seattle. And people who have been there very long, but there are also people that are working for all the tech companies. But unfortunately, I haven't found many Icelanders in Oregon. I think they must be hiding somewhere. There are Icelanders everywhere.
Like the elves.
Like the owls.
Any other questions from the group? Because I have a bunch. Okay, we have some more coming, but in the meantime, Iceland really has experienced a huge growth in tourism and some in immigration, but not as much as the other Nordic countries. How do you think that's influenced this culture of real trust, like leaving a child sleeping out in the buggy in front of a coffee shop? Is that still done? How's it influencing it?
It is. The trust is still there. You still see the children being left outside. Kids are still kind of free running. But I do think that the areas where you do that might have changed a little bit. You would do that more in the neighborhoods. I'm not sure my brother would give his 7-year-old money to take the bus downtown like I did, to spend the day downtown just doing whatever kid wants to do by the pond. So I think that has changed. The other thing that has changed is that with all the foreign tourists, we also have a lot of foreign workers. So a lot of the serving industry now have non-native speakers. And that's not really a problem because all the young people in Iceland speak English fluently. But there are some of the older people that don't. They all speak English, but they might not want to go to a restaurant and having to order in English. So it makes people uncomfortable, and I think that's a shame. Mm-hmm. But you can go anywhere in Iceland if you speak English. Everybody speaks English.
So from our watchers online, somebody is wondering what really has changed the most, sort of being here and going home. What's changed the most to you?
What has changed the most? I'll have to think about that one. Because I'm actually really impressed to see my cousins grow up and see that they still have the freedom that I did. They do have more access. I think one of the things that has changed the most and has been more like we have things in the US is that people buy things more. I was telling you about the games that we played, that we didn't all have 5 different kinds of balls. And it wasn't that our parents didn't want to buy them. It's just there was no need to have 5. You had 1 ball, that was plenty. But now I feel like all of the kids, just like here, they have to have, you have more stuff. Everybody has more stuff.
You were talking about some of the things at Christmas and knowing that a large part of the year is pretty dark. Certainly here in Oregon, people get concerned about the rainy season and the dark. And so I'm wondering, growing up, what sorts of things you did that kept you going in all the darkness, or did you even notice?
So I didn't really notice. So one of the first times when I noticed kind of the different times was actually after I moved to Seattle. And it was in the midst of summer. And I was with my friend from Florida. And she was just like, this is so great. It's bright here until 9. And I almost teared up. And it gets dark at 9. This is no good. So I noticed it more than was here because I missed the bright nights. Much more than really feeling the darkness in the winter. It is dark the whole day, but I don't know. Somehow, you're a lot more energetic in the summer, no doubt. But you get used to getting up and it being dark. Yeah.
So, Iceland, as you really talked about, like many Nordic countries, is family and child-centered and very supportive of women. What elements of that do you see kind of in contrast from your growing up between there and Oregon, and how do you see it changing?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I thought was really striking when I moved to the U.S. and I was talking to women my age, and just what they considered their role, like what they considered their role in a household and things like that. Because I'm raised in essentially a feminist country, in a very feminist family, so that was never really a thing. You know, it's like, it's not necessarily my job to cook, because I'm actually, honestly, I'm a terrible cook. So the other thing that I think, though, is the most important is the sample it sets. The fact that growing up, like, I had a female president, like the second prime minister I ever recognized was a female. So I didn't really, like, there was a lot of things that I didn't understand was unusual until I came to the U.S., especially in the last kind of 10 years with the Kamala Harris coming to the White House as a, vice president. But for me, growing up, I was like, yeah, why not? I don't see anything about that.
So you talked about how you can always find somebody you know in common. And a small society like that, it has a lot less anonymity. And so there are sort of pros and cons of having less anonymity. Was that ever an issue growing up?
I think Reykjavik might have been, maybe it was big enough. But it is right. You can never, there's no hiding in the crowd. There is no doing something stupid and people not knowing about it. But then again, everybody does something stupid. So we all did something wrong at some point. So I guess it evens out. But yeah, I thought that was kind of odd when I moved to the US, being able to walk around Seattle for days and seeing no one that recognized me. That was kind of weird.
So you put some traditional foods up for Christmas. Is there a traditional food that really is your very favorite?
So there are some really good things about being Icelandic. One of the things is that you can bring uncooked meat legally to the U.S. if it comes from Iceland. So when I go to Iceland, I come back, I bring smoked lamb, which is our Christmas meat, hamburgerhryggur, which is smoked ham, and just a little bit of Icelandic lamb. That's our Sunday meal growing up. We would mostly have boiled potatoes and boiled fish. 6 days a week for most part. 5 days. Okay, 5 days. But Sundays was always a leg of lamb and potatoes, of course. Always potatoes. So in Iceland, when you cook a meal, you fill a pot with water, a little bit of salt and potatoes. You start boiling it, and then you figure out what you're going to have for dinner. Because always potatoes.
Any other questions from the group? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Åsa.
I want to thank you so much, Líney, for coming all the way from Corvallis to do this. You're a very accomplished speaker, very polished and very sophisticated. And I'll give you an A+.
Thank you.
So, and also you really enlighten us with how it was to grow up in Iceland. It's a very enticing place, and I think we all feel like going to Iceland right now. And I want to tell you there is a Icelandic airline going right from Portland to Reykjavik, so get your ticket. So, and thank you again. It was really, really good. You were so polished. I wish I could deliver such a speech like you do. So thank you so much. And I have a little present for you, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming and watching from home.